All right. We're live, or I'm live, and unfortunately, I cannot rotate the device. So hopefully, I'm coming in live and clear. All right. So if you're at the moment, I don't have anyone tuning in. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just talk very generically because I plan to upload this, and it's going to take approximately 24 hours after I complete this talk, or after I'm on, in order for the video to process. So if you're watching this um, on Wednesday, the 8th of March or later, you may want to skip some stuff. I don't know, because this is on um, this is this is gonna take some time to process, and also I don't want to talk by myself. So we'll have some program notes in a minute. So we're doing this live. As I said, if anybody is watching this who watched my other videos, we're doing this without the use of a good camera. Um, looks like I will be getting one on Friday. If that falls through, I don't know. I may have to start e-begging or something. Um, so yeah, the discussion is going to be on real estate or rents in California. But since nobody's here yet, and I have to entertain somebody who might watch this after, I want to say a couple of program notes. So first of all, I already said beginning camera later. Second, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment, interact. You can follow me, Roger on the left, on Twitter. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. The other thing is that, today, what's been catching my fancy is something I've made a lot of videos about, or, well, I made two videos about already, which is, yeah, Marianne Williamson. Looks like Brianna Joy Gray and company, and some people on the left are pushing Marianne Williamson as a candidate, and I will probably end up doing something about that later as well. Something further. I have an idea, which won't be me talking. Won't be me talking most of the time. If you are here, if you are joining me right now, I think there's one person. I think you can comment, and I can see your. I should be able to see your comment. So we will be talking today about um, rents here in California and property here, because basically what happened was, I want to talk about that because I've been wanting to talk about that for a while. I said to a friend of mine, it doesn't appear like there's a movement in California to really do something about the rents that are too high. And my friend corrected me and said, "Oh, that's not true. I mean, there's rent control and there's things of that nature. So there's been pressure on politicians. But the fact of the matter is that the rents are still too high, and it's not a movement the way that I would register a movement. Like a bunch of people complaining to Democrats and Democrats passing the bare minimum. That doesn't really strike me as like a movement, like what I'm interested in, which is rents should really go down a lot. And I was reminded of another conversation I had with another person on social media in which they said, your opinion, and this is really what this video is really about, but my opinion he was referring to is kind of worthless because you don't really have any studies, and all the professionals, meaning city managers and such, their view the city manager view is the reason that rents are so high is because of lack of supply. Now, if you were to ask around, usually you get two categories. One, California has a big um, industrial base where they have like Silicon Valley or they have tech firms, and the presence of these tech firms with high paid professionals makes rent go up. The second thing which they mentioned is there's not enough supply. You see, a lot of people want to live here, and despite the fact that some people have been moving out, the vast majority of people are happy here or stuck here. So there's a lot of demand, and so the logic goes not enough supply. And the main problem is, so if I talk to liberals about this, not leftists, but if I talk to liberals about this and some conservatives, the main problem they're going to tell me is there's not enough apartments, make more apartments. And I keep thinking, like, what planet are they on? Do they go outside? Because I've been living here all my life, and all I see is construction. Because why? Because people want to invest in construction for money, for purposes of making money. What does that mean? That means this: increasing the supply, increasing the supply of property is not going to necessarily decrease the cost of rents. The reason for that is because a lot of property that's being constructed basically isn't being used to live in, number one. Number two, a lot of it is luxury apartments. And number three, you you can't ask the private sector to invest in making property and in making apartments and in making homes to decrease the actual cost of living in a home. That does not make any sense. That's not the purpose of investment. So, and so a lot of people say, well, you don't have any facts or you don't have any, studies to back up what you're saying. I see only one person following me. I had three people. Nobody is commenting either. You could say hi. That's allowed. Um, so one person in particular, a friend of mine on Facebook, was saying, you don't really have anything to go on. You don't have any studies. Show me where increasing the supply is actually going to lead to higher rents. I don't want to know about your personal experience, because my personal experience is the town that I live in. There are a lot of apartments being built, and the rents keep going up and up and up. And it's only going in one direction, despite the fact that we have a lot. Oh, thank you, Adrian. Adrian finally coming through. No, she always comes through for me if I ask. So, I mean, finally somebody's coming through. Uh, I promoted the hell out of this on Twitter and on Facebook, but it's nice. Nice to see you, and I'm sure it's nice to see me on YouTube. So I was going to talk about this article, and what I'm going to do with this article is I'm going to link to the article when this goes on, when I upload this or when it's processed and it goes up, and then hopefully we can have a discussion then. But this article has to do with Orange County, and it talks about some statistics. Like, the article is from 2017. During that period of time in 2017, 34,000 apartments were built in the Irvine area, and only 11% of those apartments turned out to have affordable rent. 11%, and by affordable, we're talking about over $1,800 a month, which is not a great price, but that's their definition of affordable. Remember, this is back in 2017. And that goes to show what happens when you actually increase the supply of apartments. We're 10 minutes in. All right. So I'm going to link to. I'm going to put the link on when this video is processed, and is up, and people will be able to watch it later. But my point is, it's not really anecdotal. This is just reality. Reality is that there's been a slew in the last 20 years, a gigantic boom of construction in Southern California. There are apartments everywhere that I can think of, not just Glendale and Irvine, but downtown Los Angeles. And what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on property owners to sell because it's a lot of money they can get, or to tear down whatever's there. And like if it's a restaurant or a small business, and tear it down and build apartments. And there is a lot of pressure to do that. So the idea that somehow there's non responsive, whatever it is, the market is not responsive, is that's not true. Another excuse that people say is, well, there are a lot of regulations. That's what they'll say. There are a lot of regulations, but the thing is in California is you get around a lot of the red tape if you're connected, and if you do what's called mixed use. So what happens is some of these units are supposed to take subsidized renters, and then what they try to do is they try to add retail space in there to make up for that. Um, but the bottom line is it still affects rent. Rents still go up. And the idea that the problem in California is, well, there's just too much. There's too much red tape. That kind of doesn't really make sense because I don't see the overall effect of that. What I see is there's plenty of construction and plenty of homes, but a lot of those homes are empty. And then people take them off their taxes. Or I see a lot of homes available, but they're priced into the stratosphere. And overall, what I see consistently on the part of the market is that the price just keeps going up and up and up, regardless of the supply. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to have a little bit of input from other people, but I'll keep talking about this phenomenon because in this article, it also talks about, the 11% figure that comes up. Um, that there was a housing bubble, right? There was a housing bubble burst. The bubble burst in 2007, 2008 when there was that financial meltdown. In point of fact, a lot of areas, even housing when the housing bubble burst, a lot of areas recovered fairly quickly, like my area recovered fairly quickly, and real estate prices stayed and rents stayed very, very high. Um, and the fact is that the overall effect was that a lot of people who are homeowners were forced to rent because they lost their homes. And so, if anything, the real estate bubble bursting did not really, in the long run or the medium run, affect uh, landowners or landlords. At first, there was, yes, rents went down a bit, but then there was the realization that all these people who lost their homes would have to live somewhere. So that increased investment into owning homes. So actually, there's been an increase in demand at the same time that there was a collapse in the housing market. But the collapse in the housing market was also a matter of public policy. If you recall, it was the result of number one, low interest rates, number two, not properly monitoring the rating agencies like Moody's when they were bribed by the banks, number three, not properly regulating banks and mortgage-backed securities, and allowing them to create fake investments by bundling subprime loans as AAA rated loans. Um, and lastly, the TARP program, which actually incentivized banks to foreclose on homeowners. So all that was a matter of public policy, and there wasn't a moratorium, which should have. There should have been a nationwide moratorium on foreclosures and a freeze for 6 months at least, and the realization of, okay, if we make all these people homeless, it's going to uh, torpedo the economy, which it did. And then, of course, it also led to complications with the rental markets, and that's another reason why rents are so high, is because homes are either the home loan itself is a form of scam and is onerous, or home prices are just ridiculously high, and that's driven again by markets. The state of California is not in the business of telling people what they can charge. And this scapegoat of saying to people, well, there are regulations about how you build things, and that doesn't. There are so many things being built in California. If you go out to Corona, if you go out to Irvine, if you go out to Riverside, there is plenty of home construction and real estate speculation and all of that. It's just not being done in an intelligent way, and it's being done for the benefit of a few people who are in it to play the casino economy. So that's why things are the way they are. Um, Let me check the time right now. 8:13. I said I was going to go to 8:30, so I guess I can talk about whatever I want. In this time together now that we have, I want to also talk about my experience, or my family's experience, renting, because we rented a place in downtown Los Angeles. We were never able to buy it, so we rented the space. And then the space we were renting, and we were in the restaurant business for 42 years. It was a family owned place, family run for the most part. And we rented from an Italian gentleman who has since passed away. But for those 42 years, pretty much, we rented, for about almost 40 years, we rented from him. He was a World War II veteran. That part of town is sort of like the apex between the old Italian neighborhood, the old Spanish-speaking neighborhood or Mexican, and the Chinese. And all three groups met in that area, which today we call Chinatown. And he was an old school Italian guy, and we used to rent from him. And he didn't have any debt. He didn't have a mortgage on the property, so he used to undercharge us, and we could pay him whenever we wanted. I saw the lease paper myself. The lease was literally from the 1950s, and we paid rent on this property. And then one day, we got a notice that we shouldn't be paying him the rent anymore. We should be paying 6 or 7. It was like a group of lawyers, right? And it turns out his daughter, and this is relevant because you're going to see how this game is played. His daughter had borrowed about $160,000 on the property, uh, but he wasn't dead yet, and he hadn't authorized the loan. And we were just point blank told, okay, don't pay him anymore. Pay these lawyers, because they were all lawyers, and we were supposed to pay them this money, and then there was some legal toing and froing, and I asked my family, I asked my uncle and my aunts, how is it possible that somebody could borrow? Like, I can't borrow off my mom's property, I can't borrow off my grandfather's property or something. I can't do any of that stuff, and they could never come up with an explanation. And the worst part of it is this: they were trying to foreclose. These lawyers were trying to foreclose on a property that was worth at least $1 million from $160,000 loan. Like, she could have easily gone, assuming that she borrowed the money, She could have easily and gone to another bank and borrowed the $160,000 off this $1 million property. So it didn't make any sense to me. And he didn't even authorize it. So anyway, that was a big hullabaloo or whatever. That was a big problem for the last couple of years. And then when he died, they got a court order, these 7 lawyers, they got a court order that we had to pay them as they were the new owners. And we still had a few years left off the last lease, and we had to pay them and the money. And then, by the way, they were so unhappy about this lease, and they were so unhappy about the rent that they were locked into, that they did everything in their power to make our life miserable. I mean, my family is nowhere near where I am politically. So what they did is they put in a marijuana distribution area right next to us, like a dispensary, a marijuana dispensary. They called the health department on us. They created, they took our sign, like the sign advertising the business, which is like, I don't know, $25,000 or something. Then they took that away. They locked us out of our own business at one point. I mean, it was hideous. And the day that the lease ended, they were so happy. They're like, "You guys are out of here," and they tore the whole place down, including the parking lot, which was the parking lot belonged to a private company that contracted through the city. If you know anything about LA politics, you know parking lots don't pay their taxes. And they were there. The lawyers were using it. They would park there, lawyers, because we were very close to the courts, and so people would go there and that worked in the courts, like attorneys and stuff, and they would park there. And the thing of it is that even that, which we were told we could never go near, like we could never use that parking lot. We always had problems with that parking lot. Everything got torn down to make mixed use apartments and retail space. And then later on, I found out the space that we were using, that we were renting for less than 2,000 a month, was going for 8 grand a month. By the way, but through chicanery, is the only way I could describe it. These lawyers ended up taking this property. Like they ended up just getting the property for $160,000 and turning it into like a $10 million bonanza for them. Uh, they now have Rite Aid as a tenant, and they now have all these rich people down there. If you know anything about LA, you know that there are a lot of apartments for rich people, people that work for corporations like Warner Brothers and USC students, University of Spoiled Children. I'm sorry if you're a USC grad, but uh, that's basically what downtown has become in the last 20 years. It's an explosion of very expensive apartments, and that's what happened to my family's business. And they didn't even the lawyers that got the property were not even, I mean, they didn't even do it legitimately. I never saw them. I never knew them. The only person I know was a hired representative who treated us like total crap. And they don't care about the community or the history of who we were. For 42 years, we were there and making excellent home cooking for people. And that, the hell with that. We're just going to replace this with Rite Aid. That's what ended up happening. And they stole the property. They stole it. So I am not very, even if somebody was married, let's say somebody got the property through a divorce. I'm aware of this multi-million-dollar property a friend of mine manages. It's like 156 units. It sits on a multi-acre parcel, whatever. Uh, the value of it is probably north of $60 million. It's in Orange County. It generates hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, probably. All this is going on, and the person who owns it, who is now very older and infirm and is suffering from cancer, so I think she put the whole property into a trust. If you look at that property, she got it through a divorce. Now, yes, I know women suffer a lot in marriages. I don't want to discount that. I don't know what she did to earn the property, but what I'm saying is people have this image of landlords as scraping their way to riches, and that's just not the truth. By the way, she's told me how she raises the rents. My friend that works in that property, she's actually told me about how they figure the rents out. And I might link to that. There's an article on that too about software that these landlords use. Basically, if you build a new unit or new units across the street from old units, you're going to raise your rent to match that, you know? So, um, as far as I'm concerned, the entire thing is basically a scam. And that's what it is. And it's independent of supply and demand as it's usually phrased. So if you're talking to a liberal and they start telling you about supply and how it's a question of increasing the supply, that's a total and complete scam. It's basically a phrase that's used to excuse the abuses of the market, the banks, the real estate interests, the landlords, the software company, because there's a software company being sued that figures out how to fix rents. That's what they do. I mean, they fix rents. Just like Coke and Pepsi, they don't necessarily have to have a meeting, but they fix the price of soda. That's what's going on. And the idea, the concept that, I mean, even in this article that I'm going to post later, you look at the article, it says, well, obviously they're not making enough apartments. Like the answer is always to do more of what already failed, right? So that's what I wanted to get out today. I don't know how long. It's 8:22. I still have another 8 minutes, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm not getting a lot of feedback, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a program note that next time I'm going to talk about uh, what I've been promising to talk about for a long time, which is what I consider to be proper left practice, what I think we should be focused on, what I think we should be doing. Um, that's not supporting Marianne Williamson. That's not supporting politicians. And in terms of wrapping it up for today and what that has to do with real estate prices in California and rents, there needs to be a disruption of the status quo, not a simply waiting and to see which candidate shows up that you're going to vote for, that you're going to support, because that's a losing strategy. And that's just been going in circles over and over. We need a forceful new politics that is labor driven and driven by the poor. And that's what we need to do. And protesting is important, but disruption and organization and solidarity is very, very important. And one of the problems here in LA that I think plays into the whole thing with real estate is that everybody's in their own boat. And even if there is organization, it's usually like, a Nawak League in Highland Park and whatever it is going on in downtown with the Salvadorans, they're not talking to each other. And the Koreans are in their own little universe, largely bourgeois. But there's no conversations going on between those three groups. The white people are usually there's some involved in, let's say, protesting police brutality. When I went down to Occupy LA, that's who I met. It was a lot of white people. There weren't a lot of Latinos there because there's no solidarity. Even though the Occupy LA people voted to have solidarity with Spanish speakers and with immigrants, the immigrants weren't there. I know of one person who was a labor organizer who went down to Occupy LA and they didn't want anything to do with her. Like they didn't trust her. That's frightening. That's absolutely frightening. And that manifests itself because obviously if everyone's atomized and not working together, what's going to happen? Your neighborhoods are going to be gentrified. They're going to be turned into Airbnbs. That's another thing that's driving up the costs. And you're going to see a lot of people who were on fixed incomes or who were barely surviving being pushed into other areas, which increases the demand in certain areas, which increases the rent. Because if you can't live in Glendale because you can no longer live off a salary of $3,000 a month or something, you can't afford to live in Glendale. Where are you going to go? Tarzana, I guess. But if you go to, or I should say Tahunga, if you go to Tahunga, Tarzana is much farther away. But if you go all the way out to Tahunga, what is that doing to the rents at Tahunga? I mean, these days you can't even go to Palmdale. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell people. If you don't stand up against the powerful and the people who have fixed and rigged the game, if you're not angry, I don't know what you're on. You're not going to get any results. So I'm about out of gas here. I'm getting some messages. Um, but, thank you very much for everybody who showed up. I think there were 3 of you. This video will be up in about 24 hours. It takes a long time for YouTube to process it. And, like I said, and there are some statistics here on my side. And there's also common sense and experience. And I mean, I don't know what to tell people who are naive or who are basically liberals, because I think that's really the main group of people that are in denial about how California works. I mean, yeah, Republicans like to say that California is a some sort of People's Republic of communist bear or something, but that's not what California is, right? California is a state in a capitalist country, and it's for profit, and that's how things work. And there are a lot of sectors of capital, banks, and real estate brokers, et cetera, and they make theirs. So it's kind of stupid to think that it's the government. When what is the government? The government in the United States is a capitalist government. And what is capitalism? Capitalism is a public-private partnership. That means the government's always going to do what they can to benefit the people who are well connected, like the people who run the banks and the real estate companies and the landlords, right? Isn't that what they're supposed to be doing? Like people act like California is Venezuela and Tennessee, is some sort of anarcho-capitalist paradise. I don't know. I think people are on drugs, so they're just beyond the pale. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you again. Join me on Twitter, Roger on the left. If you're watching this, well, it's too late for a program note now, but I will talk to you guys later. And yeah, thanks again. Bye.